Hi everybody, this is Dr. Bev Knox, your psychology exam study buddy. So this is another episode of me assisting you in acing your psychology exam. And in this episode, we are going to cover the topic of thinking. Okay, are you ready? Yes? Wonderful. All right, so before we get into concepts and prototypes, let's go over what cognition means, okay? Cognition is all the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communication. So cognition, and you will hear cognitive theory, cognitive psychology, cognition, this, that, what have you. Cog, Cognition. So cognition is all the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. What is cognition? And if I were to ask you this on one of my quizzes, which I do, hint, hint, I want you to associate, if I said, give me just one word to associate with cognition, I would want you to give me the word thinking, okay? So cognition is the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. Now, psychologists who study cognition focus on the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating information. One of these activities is forming concepts, mental groupings of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. A concept is a mental grouping of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. Now, the concept chair includes many items. A baby's high chair, a reclining chair, a dentist chair. I mean, think of all the different types of chairs. Go ahead, name a few. Yeah, a stool, a sofa or couch, a love seat, a recliner. I mean, you just think of it. These are all kind of like examples of chairs. They're all for sitting. So concepts simplify our thinking, okay? Imagine life without them. I don't think you could. I mean, we would not ask a child to throw the ball because there would be no concept of throw or ball. Instead of saying, they were angry, we would have to describe expressions and other words. Concepts such as ball and anger give us much information with little cognitive efforts. Okay, so let's recap just a little bit. Cognition is all the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. And a concept is a mental grouping of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. And I like to think of concepts as categories. That, to me, that makes it a lot easier. So it would be the category. And now a prototype. Let's talk about prototypes. A prototype is a mental image or best example of a category. So whereas concept would be the category, a prototype would be the best example of that category. So matching new items to a prototype provides a quick and easy method for sorting items into categories, okay? As when comparing feathered creatures to a prototypical bird, for example, such as a robin, okay? So concept is a mental grouping of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. Prototype is a mental image or best example of a category. So we often form our concepts by developing prototypes, which is a mental image or best example of a category. Now, people more quickly agree that a crow is a bird, but that a penguin is also a bird. So people would see the crow as being more of a bird than that of a penguin, okay? For most of us, the crow is the quote-unquote birdier bird, okay? It is more closely resembles our bird prototype in our brain, where we are quicker to use a robin or a crow or an eagle as a bird, okay? All right. Let's see. The next definition that I want you to know is the definition of insight. A sudden realization of a problem's solution. So when we're talking about problem solving strategies and obstacles, there are certain words that you probably should know. Algorithm for one, heuristic is another one, and insight. So these three words we put together. Now, heuristic is a simple thinking strategy that often allows us to make judgments and solve problems efficiently, usually speedier, but also more error-prone than an algorithm. Heuristic is a simple thinking strategy that often allows us to make judgments and solve problems efficiently. Usually it's more faster, but it's also more error-prone than an algorithm. An algorithm is a methodology, or rather logical rule or procedure that guarantees solving a particular problem. So it's a logical rule or procedure that guarantees solving a particular problem. Contrasts with the usually speedier but also more error-prone use of heuristics. So what's a heuristic again? It's a simple thinking strategy that often allows us to make judgments and solve problems efficiently. Usually it's fast, but it does what? That's right. It's more error-prone. That's right. Now let's get back to insight. An insight is a sudden realization of a problem's solution. Insight a sudden realization of a problem's solution. All right. Now, insightful as we are, other cognitive tendencies may lead us astray. Confirmation bias, for example, leads us to seek evidence for our ideas more eagerly than we seek. Look, let me just tell you right now, okay? Lots of us have confirmation bias, okay? Where we seek evidence for our ideas more eagerly than we seek evidence against them. Most of us do this. By the way, I'm going to include 2 videos in the description box below. One about thinking, okay, thinking more in depth, and also language development. Thinking, language, and thought development. I will put the link below. But I will also put another video that explains different belief biases more in depth. And the belief bias go over confirmation bias more in depth for a greater understanding of why and how you think, the way you think, and your belief system, okay? And how it came about you believe in what you believe, all right? So confirmation bias is a word to know. Definitely you will see that word on many, many psychology exams. It is the tendency to search for information that supports our preconceptions and to ignore or distort contradictory evidence. All right, that is a word to know. Okay, so another word would be fixation. Fixation in thinking is the inability to see a problem from a new perspective. So many people have that problem, and I don't want you to have that problem, okay? All right. Fixation is, in thinking, the inability to see a problem from a new perspective, an obstacle to problem solving. So, in thinking, fixation is an obstacle to problem solving. All right? And that's not cool. That's why in all my classes, I make sure my students know the 5 major models in psychology. And they have to present a current event using all 5 perspectives. You got to know how to approach an idea or a problem using multiple perspectives, not just one. Fixation in thinking is the inability to see a problem from a new perspective. It is an obstacle to problem solving. Now, a prime example of fixation is the term mental set. Our tendency to approach a problem with a mindset of what has worked for us previously. Instead, now listen to this, okay? So a mindset is a tendency to approach a problem in one particular way, often a way that has been successful to us in the past. Do you understand? Often a way that what? That has worked for us previously. Indeed, solutions that worked in the past often do work on new problems. It does. As a perceptual set predisposes what we perceive. A mental set predisposes how we think. Sometimes this can be an obstacle to problem solving, as when our mental set form our past experiences. Okay? So our mental set is a tendency to approach a problem in one particular way, often a way that has been successful in the past. All right? Okay. Intuition. That's another word I want you to know. Intuition is an effortless. Know this word, because in one of my exams, I think I substitute that word effortless with effortful. Okay? Intuition is an effortless, immediate, automatic feeling of thought as contrast with explicit, conscious reasoning. So, intuition, an effortless, immediate, automatic feeling of or thought as contrasted with explicit, conscious reasoning. So, when making each day's hundreds of judgments and decisions, like, should I take a jacket? Can I trust this person? Should I shoot the basketball or pass to the player who's hot? We seldom take the time and effort to reason systematically. We follow our intuition, which is our fast, automatic, unreasoned feelings and thoughts. After interviewing policymakers in government, business, and education, social psychologists concluded that they often do not use a reflective problem-solving approach. How do they usually arrive at their decisions? If you ask, they are likely to tell you they do it mostly by the seat of their pants. That is intuition. An effortless, immediate, automatic feeling of thought as contrasted with explicit, conscious reasoning. Now, let's talk about the representativeness. Did you hear that word? Representativeness heuristics. Okay, that is a word you need to know. Representativeness heuristic. Estimating the likelihood of events in terms of how well they seem to represent or match particular prototypes. Do we remember what a prototype is? I told you that is one thing you need to know on any psych exam in regards to thinking is the definition of concept and prototype. A prototype is a mental image or best example of a category. A prototype is a mental image or best example of a category. And when we are talking about representativeness heuristic, it is estimating the likelihood of events in terms of how well we seem to represent or match particular prototypes. This may lead us to ignore other relevant information. Now, availability heuristic is estimating the likelihood of events based on their availability in memory. Availability heuristic is estimating the likelihood of events based on their availability in memory. If instances come readily to mind, perhaps because of their vividness, we presume each events are common. All right, let us move on. All right, let's talk about overconfidence. Sometimes our decision and judgments go awry simply because we are more confident than correct. And this tendency to overestimate the accuracy of our knowledge and judgments is called overconfidence. Those who are wrong are especially vulnerable to overconfidence. One experiment gave students various physics and logic problems. Students who falsely thought a ball would continue following a curved path when rolling out of a curved tube were virtually as confident as those who correctly discerned that the ball, like water from a curved hose, would follow a straight path. So overconfidence is the tendency to overestimate the accuracy of our knowledge and judgment. Nevertheless, overconfidence sometimes has adaptive value, okay? Believing that their decisions are right and they have time to spare. Self-confident people tend to live more happily. They tend to have happier lives. So that part is good. Okay. Let's move on to belief perseverance. I know we spoke on confirmation bias earlier. Let's move on to belief perseverance, because that's another part of the element. And don't forget, I've got a video linked in the description below explaining more about belief biases, and I go more in depth in regards to confirmation bias, belief bias, belief perseverance. Okay, so that's explained more in the video link below. But belief perseverance basically is clinging to one's initial conceptions after the basis on which they were formed has been discredited. Our overconfidence is startling. Equally so is our belief perseverance, which is our tendency to cling to our beliefs in the face of contrary evidence. A classic study of belief perseverance engaged people with opposing views of capital punishment. After studying two supposedly new research findings, one supporting and the other refuting the claim that the death penalty deters crime, each side was more impressed by the study supporting its own beliefs, and each readily disputed the other study, thus showing the pro and anti-capital punishment groups the same mixed evidence actually increased their disagreement. Rather than using evidence to draw conclusions, they used their conclusions to assess evidence, a phenomena also known as motivated reasoning. So belief perseverance is clinging to one's initial concepts after the basis on which they were formed has been discredited. I want you to think about this for a little bit, okay? What is belief perseverance? Clinging to one's initial conceptions after the basis on which they were formed has been discredited. Now let's just pause for a minute. Can you think of a personal example of belief perseverance? Think about it. Can you think of a time when you clinged to your own initial conceptions after, now notice that word after, okay, after the basis on which you formed these conceptions were discredited? I'm sure you could. I mean, we all have examples in our own mind of our own belief biases and belief perseverance. Okay, let's move on to the effects of framing. Framing is the way an issue is posed. How an issue is framed can significantly affect decisions and judgments. Framing is the way we present an issue. It can be a powerful tool of persuasion. Governments know this. People are more supportive of gun safety than gun control. So it's the way we frame something. It's the words we use to caress a topic, okay? For example, choosing to live or die. Imagine two surgeons explaining the risk of an upcoming surgery. One explains that this type of surgery, 10% of people die. The other explains that 90% survive. The information is the same. The effect, however, is not. In real-life surveys, patients and physicians overwhelmingly say the risk is greater when they hear that 10% die. Again, it's the way you what? Frame it. Hence the term framing. The way an issue is posed. How an issue is framed can significantly affect decisions and judgments. All right? Okay, so let's move on to thinking creatively. Let's just think about creativity, how we are able to think in our creative zone and mode, okay? Creativity is the ability to produce new and valuable ideas. Do you think creatively at all? Yes, of course you do. And that's a good thing, by the way. All right. Creativity is the ability to produce new and valuable ideas. Creativity is the ability to produce ideas that are both novel and valuable. Convergent thinking is narrowing the available problem solutions to determine the single best solution. We're going to go over convergent thinking versus divergent thinking. So with convergent thinking, it's narrowing the available problem solutions to determine the single best solution. Divergent thinking, on the other hand, is expanding the number of possible problem solutions. So again, convergent thinking is narrowing the available problem solutions to determine the single best solution. And divergent thinking is expanding the number of possible problem solutions. Creative thinking that diverges in different directions. Okay, so Robert Sternberg and his colleagues believed that creativity has 5 components. And I thought it would be interesting for us to go over this now, because I know it would benefit you just knowing what these 5 components are. Okay, the expertise, that's the first one. Well-developed knowledge. So again, Robert Sternberg and his colleagues believe creativity has 5 components. The first being expertise, which is well-developed knowledge. It furnishes the ideas, images, and phrases we used as mental building blocks. All right, so that's the expertise. Second, number 2, the imaginative thinking skills provide the ability to see things in novel ways, to recognize patterns, and to make connections. Having mastered a problem's basic elements, we can redefine or explore it in a new way. Third, a venturesome personality seeks new experiences, tolerates ambiguity and risk, and perceives in overcoming obstacles. Intrinsic motivation is number 4, is the quality of being driven more by interest, satisfaction, and challenge than by external pressures. Creative people focus less on intrinsic motivations like meeting deadlines, impressing people, or making money than on the pleasure and stimulation of the work itself. Now, a creative environment is number 5. A creative environment sparks support and refines creative ideas. And that is a huge, huge, huge deal. In fact, I've got a video all about creating a positive, healthy environment for yourself. Because why? Because it sparks and refines creative ideas. Okay? For those seeking to boost the creative process, research offers some ideas. Develop your expertise. Okay? And again, this should help you. All right? So, according to research, you need to develop your expertise. Ask yourself what you care about and most enjoy. Follow your passion by broadening your knowledge base and becoming an expert at something. Next, allow time for incubation. Think hard on a problem, but then set it aside and come back to it later. For those with enough knowledge, the needing mental building blocks, a period of inattention to a problem allows for automatic processing to form associations. Next, set aside time for the mind to roam freely. Creativity springs from, quote unquote, defocused attention. So detach from attention grabbing television, social networking, and video gaming. Jog, go for a long walk, or meditate. Serenity seeds spontaneity. Now, next, experience other cultures and ways of thinking. Living abroad sets the creative juices flowing. Control studies show that students who have spent time abroad and embracing their host culture are more adept to working out creative solutions to problems. Even getting out of your neighborhood and exposing yourself to multicultural experiences fosters flexible thinking. Another thing you could do, which is what I've done throughout my life, is through periods of time, let's just say 3 months, 3 or 4 months at a time, I would pretty much binge watch in my free time movies from a particular culture, whether it's only movies from India, for example, or only movies from from a country in South America, or only African movies, which is one of my favorite. They call it Nollywood movies from Nigeria. How would I know anything about Lagos, for example, which is a large city near Nigeria where a lot of movies are made, and about the surrounding villages around that particular area? And I have learned a lot of the customs and rituals just by watching, movies from that particular region. So yes, experience other cultures and ways of thinking. If you can't go visit that particular place in person, watch movies with representative examples of that particular region. If not just documentaries and not just movies. You want to do, a combination of both. But anyway, that is a great example. Okay, now there is another section that goes hand in hand with thinking. It's language development, okay? And I thought for this Study Buddy episode, I'm only going to focus really on thinking, okay, and a thinking process. And I will include another video in the description link below about language development. So you could view that information there, okay? Because I am going to end this episode of your psychology exam Study Buddy. And in our next episode, I'm going to give you actual questions and answers in regards to thinking from a psychology exam, an actual psychology exam. You guys know the deal already, okay? I am here to help you ace your psychology exam. Anyway, this is episode 18, all about thinking and cognition. In episode 19 is the questions and answers from actual psychology exams. Alrighty, guys, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next episode.